Hey everybody, welcome to the Bass Shed Podcast. My name's Ryan Roberts. Alright, so today on the show we have electric bassist Steve Jenkins. Steve is a solo artist, composer. He's done some teaching. We'll talk about the courses he's done for Scott's bass lessons. We'll talk about his records. I'll have links up at thebassshed.com/podcast/Steve Jenkins with links to his website and where you can check out his records. Obviously, he's going to have those same links on his website as well. And we'll talk about those records in a second. I would like to thank all the new listeners and subscribers. You can continue to engage with the Bass Shed at facebook.com/thebassshed, on Twitter at Bass Shed, on Instagram at the Bass Shed. You can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher. SoundCloud will be coming soon. I gotta deal with that. I gotta put them up on SoundCloud, but they'll be there too. You can always email me at ryan@thebassshed.com or subscribe to the newsletter by texting the word SHED, SHED, to 66866. And I really try. I mean well to get the newsletter thing out. I think I use this portion of the podcast more as a newsletter than an actual newsletter. So maybe I'll do away with the newsletter. I don't know. I'm not going to say I will. Check it out, because I can't say, subscribe to it and then I'm going to cancel it. Why would you want to do that? So I need to pick a lane here. All right. Newsletters in. Newsletters happening. I've just made the executive decision. It's in. So you can subscribe to it now by texting the word SHED, SHED, to 66866. And it's in. It's in. You heard it here. It's happening. I will be sending out newsletters. So Steve Jenkins, he's got two records out. His first one was called Mad Science, and that was released in 2004. His follow-up record to that was released in 2013, and that's Steve Jenkins and the Coaxial Flutter. And the records have two very different feels to them. And I listened to them kind of out of order. So I listened to the Coaxial Flutter first, and then went back and listened to Mad Science. In retrospect, I wish I had done it the other way and listened to Mad Science and then Coaxial Flutter, so I could kind of understand the timeline a little bit better about, Steve, what he's doing as a composer and producer, and the nature of how, then I could kind of follow the through line of what he's going through and understand it with him. But I didn't. Both are great records. And what I love about the records is he covers so much ground as a bass player, and I don't want to use the word showcases, because it's not that type of bass record where it's a kind of showy, check me out bass record. But he acknowledges all the technical things that he's capable of, and a lot of musical things. The writing on Coaxial Flutter is really, really fascinating. It's just like these sections that turn real fast, but they all make sense together. It's a fantastic record. Mad Science, and he'll talk about the recording process a bit on the podcast episode here, but it's noticeably a different approach to record making. And it's just that. It's just a different approach to record making. And that one is kind of more on the jazz fusion side and less on kind of the progressive metal side. Everybody should be warned, it's going to feel like you were dropped just right into the middle of the conversation that was already happening. That's not what happened. You were actually dropped right into the end of a conversation that was happening. Steve was telling me about a tour that he had done, and we were talking about that, but coming out of that conversation, he talks about what he's cool with and what he's not cool with, and and being very discerning about his career and deliberate about who he wants to be as a bass player and as an artist. And I wanted to leave that part in because that really set the tone for so much of the conversation that we get into. And that's kind of like a thesis statement. So you're being dropped into the end of a pre-existing conversation we were having. But it kind of sets up so much of what we continue talking about. So here's the talk with Steve Jenkins.
I think, we're in this time period now where there's no shortage of places to express yourself.
Right.
And there's no shortage of places to fuck your career up expressing yourself.
Right.
So I think I'm at a place in my career now, whatever that means, where there's stuff I can't do anymore. Like, it just doesn't feel like it's okay to do that anymore. And
now, where are you at with that? Like, making those shifts, are you a little bit... a little scary to let some things go? Because as soon as you do, new things always come up.
Yeah.
But it's the initial release that's always a little bit like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
I'm stepping out into some new thing.
Yeah. Well, it's strange. So I guess, like you asked me when we were setting up, like, why did I move out here? So I was in New York for 13 years. And
let's go back a little further. Where were you born?
I'm from like the Washington D.C. area. I was born in Rockville, Maryland.
Okay.
And so for all intents and purposes, like, it was sort of a really good place to grow up because being near a city like D.C., there's a lot that city offers in terms of like cultural things. And I'm 43, so I came up in the 90s. There was like a lot of really good music in DC at that point. Okay. And it wasn't a hard place to get to from where I lived. My mom still lives in the house I grew up in. That's 20 minutes outside the city, and it was kind of an easy place to get in and out of. And then, I had I had some great teachers there. My mentor, this bass player, Dave Dyson, he's still down there. He's an amazing bass player. So, it was a good place to grow up, and I couldn't wait to leave. And it's not because it's a bad place. I just feel like, I talked to friends of mine about this who, like I have like my best friend, he grew up like right down the street from me, and we both left. Okay. And I remember recently asking, I was like, why did we leave this place? Like, what was the reason? Because it's not a bad place to be. It's not like some podunk small town in the middle.
There's stuff going on with their gigs. Like,
there are some gigs. Mm-hmm. The thing about that area is there's like some tremendously good musicians that live there.
Is there a school or something? Like, what's keeping these guys working?
I think for those guys, it's really just there's work there, but then it's a place that's not so far from New York. It's not so far from Philadelphia. It's not so far from Atlanta.
In and out, and cost of living's cool.
Cost of living's okay. I think everywhere's expensive now.
Yeah, I know.
I think what makes LA seem really doable to me is that it's not New York.
Right.
Like, I'm not going to talk about what my rent is, but what I pay to live here, I couldn't live alone with this kind of space in New York and have a car and stuff. So I think
when you were we'll get to New York in a second. Yeah. So do you leave there to go to New York? Do you leave there to go to school?
I went to school.
Okay. Where's that?
I went to Berkeley.
Okay.
My Berkeley story is weird because I actually went twice. Like, I went once initially, and then I kind of do the thing that a lot of kids do where you go to school and you get busy with music. Then you can't go to school because you're busy with music, but you're in music school, and what's more important? And I still stand by playing and
yeah, I dropped out twice, but I was playing full time.
Yeah,
so I get.
Where'd you go?
I was going to junior colleges in Phoenix.
Okay,
just to get all the stuff out of the way.
Yeah,
and then the goal was to transfer to New York.
Right on.
To study with Patitucci at what's the name of the school he's at now?
Oh, Purchase? Was he at SUNY Purchase or the new school?
No, it wasn't.
Eastman? Was he at Eastman?
It'll come to me in a second.
Yeah.
New York City College.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Patitucci's amazing, man.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize how amazing he is. Because they kind of hear the stuff he's known for, like,
Right.
but there's all this other stuff that he can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot of depth there that doesn't get always expressed on the records.
Yeah.
Because he's doing his solo thing, or
Yeah.
you know, he kind of hit the scene with Chick,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was its own brand of jazz trio, and then the electric band and all that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I dropped out twice because I was just gigging full time. I was playing like 4 or 5 nights a week,
Yeah.
and I'm just like, at the time, I didn't think that technology and culture would turn out to be what it is.
Sure.
And so I'm like, well, I can make a living doing this. You know, just keep working my way up the ladder a little bit, and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Go to school, figure that out. Maybe graduate, maybe not. I don't care.
Yeah.
And then, you know, next thing you know, like, gigs are still paying the same amount.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing is completely shifted to where you have to push your music on people via social media instead of them coming out to hear music. Yeah.
I mean, we're in a strange time. I think there's a lot of. I think the model that people are sort of used to thinking about when they think about the music business, I mean, that's sort of been long gone.
Right.
And I just think ultimately, you know, the types of things that people can do now to survive are very different than what the paradigm a musician might have in the 90s would have thought.
Right, because I mean, I thought I could get by only playing.
Yeah.
And like that was going to be enough. And little did I know that I had to develop all these other kind of micro skill sets.
Yeah.
You know, I've done arranging. I got a text message or a call yesterday about writing a bunch of charts for a singer. Like,
Yeah.
all right, sure.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a lot of other things I do now besides just doing
play.
gigs. Yeah.
Yeah. I see, the thing is, like, when I was like maybe in my teens, there was this whole, I just want to play.
Right.
I don't just want to play, man. Because for me, I don't love the sideman paradigm as much as I thought I would. I like
the hired gun, like, okay.
I like playing, and I like being, I think it's a, you know, like, I mean, I think if we're going to look at it from I'm not the most religious person, but if we look at it from a spiritual thing, I think it's an amazing thing to just play music with people. And when you feel like it's working, when it's really doing that thing, and you're not just, okay, I'm standing here and I get to go home at 12.
Right.
Like, I don't
you're not
ever
punching the clock.
Yeah, I don't ever really feel like that on gigs, even when they're gigs that are mostly work.
Yeah.
You know, like I still am amazed by how much fun and how freeing it feels to be playing music when it's being made well. That's as great as anything there is to do, you know, as a musician. But I think, just the whole idea of being, you have to be this like desirable thing that people want, and that determines your value as an artist. Like, I don't buy that anymore, man. Because I think there's like, but I think I think a lot of people who are known for being quote unquote successful side people, they're always doing their own shit, even if it doesn't manifest in the way of like solo records or whatever. Like, everybody's always being very proactive, and I think that's just what we need to have is like creative people. Like,
there's got to be a creative outlet for sure.
So I think like I'm cool with not playing all the time. I'd rather just play if it's going to be good. I mean, I think ultimately that's my strong suit. That's where I'll make the most money. But I think, you know, there's other things to do. Like, I like teaching, and I think ultimately, as long as I get paid to be me, I'm happy with that.
Sure.
That's really it for me. So
instead of just being somebody who is available that owns a bass. Yeah.
And I think that's really where most people, regardless of who it is, that's where everyone has to get to. And then I think it becomes a lot easier to look at it. But it's also very daunting, man, because it's like, you know, on one hand, it's like, you know, do I have to do this? Do I have to have a Snapchat account and stuff like that? And I don't think that's so true, but I definitely think...
Yeah, like, what are all the platforms you got to deal with? And then, like, you got to get your SEOs right.
Yeah.
You know, like, the internet's a whole other world.
Yeah. But I think the real focal point is what you do and what your content is. And I think as long as that's at the hub of it, because the platforms are always going to change and morph, but I think as long as you're sort of or not you, but like if one is just making sure that they're taking care of whatever the quote unquote thing is that they're offering, as long as that's on point, the platforms will continue to change and they won't be as important as like what's in the content. But it's like when you see a guy like a Tim Pierce have a successful YouTube channel, and that dude, he's played on all these records, and I think it's inspiring to see that, because essentially, like, the idea of being a content creator, it doesn't mean, like, people aren't doing that because they're not already successful in other areas. Like, they're doing it because this is how people are. This is what's reaching people.
Yeah, this is how you engage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real valid thing now. And I definitely think, someone, see, like, if there's always this scenario, like if I had a time machine and I could go back to a couple different places in time, like, would I go back to music school me in the early 90s and be like the whole sports almanac thing and Back to the Future like Steve, here's an iPhone 4, and then I think that shit would be, then like, you'd have all this, not like, I'd have this knowledge, okay,
right,
and then I'd become like Jeff Bezos or something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think ultimately the idea that, like, this is where we're at with where stuff is and how people consume things and are entertained, I really think it's important to consider it. I think a lot of musicians don't want to consider it, because I think it's the idea of, like, having to adapt to a future that seems impossible to adapt to, because no one knows what's coming. But I think
it's a difficult world to navigate, and I got to say that I'm kind of guilty of being the latter there. And like we were talking, I don't have a lot of personal content of me playing around. And there's just a level of, I don't know what to do. Yeah. Like, to me, playing the bass is so dependent on who I'm working with.
Sure.
So I'm taking you into account, I'm taking you into account, I'm taking you into account.
Yeah.
And I'm making all of you a little bit better. Like, that's
right.
Not in an egotistical way, but I'm supporting all of this together.
Right.
So for me to just turn on my phone and record something, I don't know. Like, there's no, I have nothing to respond to. I have nothing to support. I can't truly approach this.
Yeah.
As a bass player, like, I can, all right, here's some upright thing, or here's some electric thing. There's that. But I'll probably never play that on a gig.
Yeah. I think it's like, if you can give people something musical or something that's cool, and not think too hard about it, that's probably...
Yeah, I mean, that's clearly the default here, is I'm in my own head about a 15-second Instagram post.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've only just started to take that platform more seriously. And, YouTube, I kind of missed the boat on that, I guess. Although I guess it really doesn't matter when you start your YouTube thing.
I don't think it's going anywhere.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere. There's a lot of great stuff on there now. And I think what is cool about maybe thinking about having these types of things is, like, ultimately it gives people the incentive to really hone in on what it is that they do, because no one's going to really tell it the way the next person is. Right. So there's that fear of maybe, like, wow, like, what I have to say that's different than this person. But I think, I've watched... Do
you give master classes?
Do I?
Yeah.
I have.
Do you kind of treat the content as if you're pulling from a master class curriculum, kind of? Do you show off a technique or talk about how you do something specific?
Yeah. I guess the way I've done that kind of thing has mostly been through Scott's website.
Okay.
So I'll do these seminars where essentially... Some weeks, like, sometimes what happens is I'll know what I'm going to talk about, and then it'll just be like a 30-minute lecture on that, and then, or not lecture, but demonstrations and discussion, and then questions.
Does he let you pick what what you want to cover, or does he hit you up and be like, no, I kind of want a guy who knows this to...
Yeah, he lets me pick what I want to cover.
Okay. I haven't met him. I'd like to.
He's very cool. He's a really nice guy, really smart guy.
He's crushing it.
Yeah, he
with
is.
The online... like, the whole part of this thing I'm doing, there's a lessons angle to it, but it's all transcriptions.
Yeah.
So I transcribe, like, a ton of stuff and then create practice tracks. Because I really think if you want to be a bass player, just learn from the records. Everything you need is on a record somewhere.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's my approach to teaching. And also, I can't compete with guys like Scott. Like, I've been to his site. Like, he's got so much information up there from so many different guys.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to just walk on the field when that game's being played. Like, he's crushing it.
Yeah.
It looks amazing. He's doing a great job.
Yeah. I mean, I think also... Because I did a course on there, and that's not like I invented all those concepts, but the way they relate to my playing, that's my take on those things. So I think.
What were the things? What were the topics?
Well, I talked about like different things I do with grooves, and then I talked about some of the weirder techniques that I use. Which were more like little aside type lessons. Like the thrust of it wasn't really like, hey, here's like stuff you'll never use on a gig. But there's like a clip that
Wouldn't it be hilarious if a bass player, like, if that was their thesis for the master class, like, hey, here's a bunch of useless stuff.
Yeah.
That's really fun to practice, and you'll sound great at a music store when you can do it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think there's a track off of my last record that me and my friend played in this thing, and like Scott has extracted clips from these courses and put them up, and there's like a YouTube thing where like Scott introduces this clip, like, watch Steve do his thing, and all these people, and I'm not going to call them names because they're just folks that are on the internet, they took that to mean that I invented every part of this thing. And it's like, I'll be honest and say, it's some thumb stuff that I don't see a lot of people doing, but it's not super far removed from what like someone like Victor Wooten does, nor is it that far removed from what like guitar players like Tuck Andress do. Where it's like, it's like kind of like what Abraham does, but I never studied with any of those people.
The pluck with the thumb thing?
Like thumb stuff and using other fingers and like using the left hand to create like extra percussive notes. There's a lot of people that do that.
So you were just taking a lot of these other ideas and kind of...
It became my quote unquote my own thing. It became
your little casserole.
Yeah, because I mixed it together, and it was me doing the work, checking those people out. I would never I wasn't trying to steal anyone's credit, but the way Scott presented it, it's like, here's this guy saying he invented this stuff. Yeah. So there's like dude, there's so much hate in these comments, and it didn't really bum me out. I guess what bummed me out was that like
the way it was presented.
Yeah. Kind of like, this was bad, but I also feel like people are stupid.
Yeah, I don't think, like I said, I don't know Scott, but anything I've ever seen him post is never in a non-respectful way.
Yeah.
So if he uses, a shorter phrase or specific verbiage to communicate an idea, like, hey, check out Steve doing this.
Yes.
That doesn't mean check out Steve's technique.
That he invented.
That he is the sole creator of.
Right, yeah.
There's not that subtext involved.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not like I went up on some rock and God struck me with lightning. He's like, here you go, this is yours. Like,
right.
I mean, also, Scott does, like, probably 5 of these types of videos every couple days, so it's just weird, man, like, what people choose to fixate on. But that video has, like, almost 500,000 views. Or like close to 400,000 views, and it's like, I don't know, man. It's like, it still has more thumbs ups than thumbs downs, and it's one of those things where like there's definitely people that are not saying anything that probably really like it. And
man, I have a hard time. Like, I don't know. I haven't seen the comments thread on that video.
Yeah,
but in the back of my mind, it's like you scroll down and you see someone talking crap about it. Like, okay, dude, what's your gig?
Right.
Like, that's my first thing. It's like, who are you playing with?
Yeah.
Like, not that means who you're playing with is not your sole value as a musician, but what are you up to?
Yeah.
You know? Like, that's my first thing. It's like, who are you?
Yeah.
Like, you're you, so you can have any opinion you want, but why?
Yeah.
What, are you going to tell your friends that you talk shit on Instagram now? Like, you get off on that?
I'll never understand why people want to be that negative. I also don't think it's a moment that lingers very long for them. Like, I think it's a reaction and then they're over it.
Right.
You know, I mean, the stuff stays behind. And, you know, none of that stuff I could really take personally. It's not like, I don't really mind, but it's interesting to see like what people respond to. But dude, you know, like I've seen people write weird comments on like a Stevie Wonder video. So like,
yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? It's like whatever.
Right.
You
There's
know,
clearly no winning.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't get it. And that it's fine. It's not my place to like
police.
Yeah. I don't really care. I mean, I think it's good if people are not always in love with what it is, or if it makes someone mad, that's not a bad reaction.
You're still evoking some kind of response.
Yeah.
That's fine. Hate it.
Yeah.
I would rather... I do think it's kind of dumb that people, you know, talk shit, but at least there's something.
Yeah.
If that's honest, cool. I got a passionate response out of you through music.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also just silly because they clipped a lot of stuff out, and it's like it's a free clip for an education website, and it's like, this guy's a horrible teacher. It's like, no, motherfucker. It's like, this is a 7-minute clip for a course you're supposed to pay for.
Right.
And then also...
And pay chump change.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
What do you pay for these online lessons for a month?
Yeah.
It's like, I wouldn't even give a half-hour private lesson for.
Oh, me neither. And the thing is, man, it's like, I don't even make money off of that stuff because it's like you sort of get paid a decent amount for like, it's like a buyout type thing.
Okay.
But no, man, like Scott's awesome. I loved hanging with him, and everyone on his team is really cool. I think his model works really well. But I also think ultimately, I mean, I'm doing more education stuff. I'm doing my first video for TrueFire.
What's TrueFire?
TrueFire is a big website. Well, they're not a website. They're not just a website. They're a education thing, and most of their stuff is like done by guitar players.
Okay.
They have some bass players that have some courses on there, but I think they're trying
to bass players.
I know Stu's done some stuff. Kaya Cart has a couple videos.
Are they based out here?
In Florida.
Okay.
My good friend, who's a great guitar player and educator, Chris Bono, he does a lot of stuff for them.
Okay.
And they're awesome. Like we did a thing together. It was like me, Chris, and Keith Carlock. It was like a thing where basically you could pull out the bass or the guitar and play along and stuff.
Did you write out like a part for them to lock in with? Or is it just like this generic groove that they get to play with Keith?
There was like, I think 7 different tunes, so to speak, that Chris came with, and we just played them with him. And, you know, I mean, I think by and large, I didn't embellish or improvise too much. It was just like we're sort of more or less getting the vibe of the thing down.
Right. Kind of like an Abersol.
Yeah. But, you know, you get to play with Keith, which is like kind of a cool thing. So, and then Tamor Feld has a couple courses there, and like some other people, but it's way more guitar centric. Like Josh Smith just did something for them. Alex Skolnick. I played with both of those dudes at various times. Vi has a big thing there. So they're like, you know, they're kind of a significant thing. And then they have like a streaming thing also where like people go on there, and, you know, it's probably more suited for guitar players, but I think there's room for them to have like bass content, and they could probably build up their thing a little bit more.
Did you dive into the Patreon world at all, or
no, not yet. I want to go there. I need to build my online infrastructure a little bit more.
I've been hearing a lot about it. I've read up on it.
Yeah.
I don't like. I built a whole website for this stuff, so now I kind of a little salty. Like, I could have just went to Patreon.
Right.
But whatever. I like what I did, and I liked learning the skill of building a website.
Yeah. I also think ultimately, I haven't really figured out like what what my angle would be at with content. Like it's still very like I'm just gonna make stuff here and there. I mean, initially, I really think this wasn't something that I thought about or was premeditated. It wasn't like a premeditated idea, but I think the reason why I have any kind of career at all is because I did a record in 2004 and hired who I wanted to play on that.
That was your first record?
Yeah, the Mad Science album.
Yeah.
Because what that did was from that record, so, the person I really wanted to have on there was David Fiuczynski, who's one of my favorite guitar players. And, I loved his playing on the first two Michel and Degio cello records. I loved Screaming Headless Torsos.
What Michel records is he on?
He's on Plantation Lullabies,
Love that record.
And he's on Peace Beyond Passion.
Because there is a groove on that record that completely reminds me of like an old soul record.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Like, I don't know if it's the tempo, I don't know if it's your sound, but it's like that was yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Crushing, because I love that record.
Right on. Yeah, so, and then, he did this record with John Medeski called Lunar Crush. So I was, like, really into his type of guitar playing. And, I was also, like, a huge Living Colour fan, and I love, like, Bad Brains is one of my favorite bands. And so I liked that kind of guitar playing where it's, like, there's definitely, like, some jazz influence, but there's like funk and rock and
right.
And Fuse also had, you could tell he liked Vi and Holdsworth and like Freddie King and all these different weird.
Right, he's like really pulling from a lot of places.
Yeah,
of guitar icons.
Yeah,
cool.
And he kind of had his weird take on that. So I had written a couple tunes that I thought, okay, if I had a guy on here that sounds like Mike Stern, this would make this whole thing sound really like super fusion-y. Mm-hmm. If I get a guy who's kind of an oddball like Fuse, it's going to have that, but it's going to be a little bit weird. And I liked it. So I had Fuse play on those two tracks. My friend Charles Haynes played drums on those songs. Then most of the rest of the album is like Adam Deitch on drums, who I went to college with, and we met in the 5-week program at Berkeley. Our dear friend Jeff Basker playing keys. Jeff was the original keyboard player in Lettuce. And then he parted ways with Lettuce in like 2005. And then he moved out here. I actually took over his apartment in Brooklyn when I moved to New York. Jeff's like a Grammy-winning producer. And he won he won Producer of the Year a couple years ago. But
what record?
I think it was for Fun, like Fun's record.
Oh yeah,
but it might have been. I know Fun won the Grammy, and he won this Grammy for something else. But I know he's done like stuff with Taylor Swift, Alicia Keys. He was with Kanye for a lot of those records. Okay, he worked on like My Dark Twisted Fantasy, and Did
he ever pull you in for any pop sessions?
I haven't really seen him since I've been out here. It's also one of those things where like he's like the most successful friend I have. Yeah. And so it's one of those things where it's like I don't, he's still the same guy and like we're homies, but like I'm scared to call him because it's like I don't want him. You know what I mean? It's like
you don't want to be that guy just hitting him up for a gig.
Yeah. But you know what, man? In light of life being short, I do need to reach out and call him. Yeah. Like I was hanging with the Lettuce guys in March, and we've known each other since we were kids. And like one of the guys in the band was like, I saw Jeff, and he asked about you. So, yeah, I mean, I think eventually.
Is Rashawn still playing in Lettuce?
No, I think Rashawn's been doing Dave Matthews.
He's been doing Dave Matthews for a while. I did a gig with him. Damn, that was maybe 5 years ago. Yeah. At Largo.
Oh, cool.
And I think he was doing Dave then, but I didn't know if he was double dipping for a minute.
No, they have Eric Bloom on trumpet and Lettuce. Okay. He's excellent. So it's like Ryan Zoidis on tenor and Benny. They call him Benny Bloom. But yeah, I met the Lettuce dudes in 1992. Like that was the pivotal moment for me. So if we're gonna go back to like where I came from, the pivotal moment for me, kind of in high school, which sort of I think was like. Semi-mapped
out. When did you start playing? Let's go back to Maryland for a minute.
Okay. So I started playing bass when I was like 1988. I was like 13.
Okay.
And it was a real arbitrary thing, like, because at the time I had made some money mowing lawns for like neighbors and stuff, which is kind of what you did, I guess, when you're 13 years old, live in the suburbs, 12, 13. And so I had, a couple $100, and I think literally it was like, I'm either going to get a bass or a skateboard. Or like a new skateboard.
Were you into skating? I mean,
a little bit.
I was into BMX around that age. So I think in that time period in the world, at that age, it's like sports or BMX and like one of the extreme sports as they would later become.
Yeah. I mean, I liked it, but I was never really great at it. I just thought it was cool.
Yeah.
It turned out to be the right decision to go with bass.
What was the first bass?
So the first bass, and I still have it. It's not out here, but it was like a Charvel Model 2B, which is essentially just a PJ bass, same body style as like a P bass and everything. Like it wasn't. Like, the only thing maybe different is it had like the metal like hockey stick headstock from the.
Oh, okay.
But aside from that, it was a really easy to play, good sounding instrument. Yeah. So I was able to. I didn't have any real obstacles as far as like playing something that was like tough to sound good on. Like it was pretty well set up. And
then were you self-taught? Were you just buying like Mel Bay books, or were you into lessons? Like what was your first education to learning the instrument?
I played for myself, like by myself for a few months, just messing around. And I'd already been playing music from like a really young age because I had played piano. And when I was a little kid, I could use my ear and pick out chords and melodies.
Could you
and
read?
Stuff. Not great. I was always better at
just hearing
using my ear. Yeah. Which
then do you have siblings?
I have an older brother and a younger brother. My older brother had a couple electric guitars. And it was like I guess around the time, like right before I started playing bass and before I got a bass, I was starting to play guitar a little bit, and it was coming together. Like it was starting to feel like I could probably
get something out.
Yeah, get something out and like learn some riffs and I guess I got into bass because I couldn't decide between drums or guitar because I really liked both. Yeah. And I didn't, that was just sort of like dumb luck. It didn't really, it wasn't really like a super thought out thing, but bass just seemed like it was, that was like a good thing to play. And like out of ignorance, I felt like maybe just because in the social circles of like younger folks like me at that time, it just seemed like nobody wanted to play bass. Yeah. So I felt like that must mean it's like this huge untapped thing, not realizing there's so many amazing players. But at the time, it just seemed like, we were in sort of a guitar dominated world. Yeah. And I think like the best bass players I was aware of, just from like watching MTV and stuff, was like Muzz Skillings, like because Living Colors videos were on MTV, and then like I think Billy Sheehan from watching like Mr. Big videos, because like they had songs, like their first record come out, and like I think the first single, he and Paul Gilbert like doing this tapping thing. So it's like there was like flashy stuff, but And
what year is this?
88.
Okay.
But the thing is, like, the person that really made me want to get into music and study was Prince. Really? Like when I got Purple Rain as like a third grader, like that was like sort of what drew me in as like a younger musician. But before that, it was like Kiss. Like when I was like 4 or 5, like that was that was kind of like that was it for me. So then you kind of pair that with growing up in the 80s. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of really great bass on all those songs, man. Yeah. Like,
And then especially just a few years later in the 90s. Yeah. When they're still using live musicians on R&B and hip-hop stuff. Yeah. So much killing shit.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
And even into the rock world with Peanut and Flea and Les. Yeah. There's a lot of great bass players. Chris Chaney on a lot of those sessions.
Yeah. Doug Wimbish. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's a lot of great stuff to sort of take in. So I guess by 9th grade, that's when I started taking lessons on the regular, and I found a lot of stuff came pretty easy from a technical standpoint. Like I was able to play stuff, and my rhythm was pretty good. Fun, like from like a fundamentally like not so developed standpoint. Like
Right.
I could like play stuff, and it would sit kind of where it needed to sit. And then the first teacher I had, taught me how to slap, and he had like proper technique, so
Okay.
it was always really musical. And he taught me like some lines, and so I was kind of off.
Are you
to
learning like Larry Graham lines? You just learning like some licks and patterns to get hands working together?
kind of both.
Okay.
Kind of both. Like he showed me a few licks and patterns that I could build from, and then it made it easy for me to like try to learn like Larry Graham bass lines and stuff that was like Louis Johnson stuff, and like even like some Mark King stuff.
Yeah.
And then I think because I developed some good habits, a lot of the more advanced things weren't as tough to like attempt to get into later. But yeah, no. So I mean, it was cool. And then I caught like the fusion sort of jazz bug maybe like a couple years into high school. Like by junior year, I think I was listening to a lot of that stuff.
What was your in? Was it more on the Mahavishnu side or more on the Weather Report side?
Well, I think coming from progressive rock, like Rush.
Okay.
Rush was like, they're one of my favorite bands, but I'd say like Rush and Living Colour were the two bands that really got me thinking about.
But more on the rock tip.
More on the rock tip.
Yeah.
And then on the funk tip too.
Right.
And then, yeah, I think the first stuff I heard that really like kind of like made me go sideways was like that first teacher I had made me like a mixtape of all these different bass players.
Oh, wow.
And so
That's cool, man. I like
Yeah.
that he took the time and initiative to invest into a student
Yeah.
that much. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, you could tell I was serious, and
Yeah.
I was like hungry to like learn this stuff. And I think this is sort of a weird thing that I don't see a lot happening now, because, and I'll get to that in a second, but like the people on that tape was like, there's Jocko, Stanley,
Okay.
Alfonso Johnson, Anthony Jackson, like the Steve Kahn Eyewitness Anthony Jackson, which obviously like that's just one small part of like his amazing recorded work. But Jeff Berlin, I'm trying to think of who else was on there that he put that was like really good. Oh, some Marcus stuff, but like
Tribal Tech.
yeah, Tribal Tech. Although this was like right before that record they did called Illicit came out, so there was a purple one.
Was that the one with like the seashell or the spiral on it?
That one's called Thick.
Okay.
That was like I think late '90s. Yeah, I love those guys.
Yeah.
Gary Willis was like a huge influence for me, man. At least in terms of like his sound and like the way he finesses certain things.
And his phrasing, like he's known as like the fusion guy and doing all the things, and but his phrasing is insane.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites even to this day for that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
man. I mean, that's more. Oh, and then Jimmy Johnson. Like
Sure.
I feel like Jimmy Johnson and Gary are like my two real favorite like fusion dudes. Like besides Jocko, I guess. Like, that's sort of like where for that kind of playing, that's what I like to think about. Because I feel like now everyone plays fast, so playing fast is not inherently the most interesting way to go. Some people do it and it's like, wow, that's fucking.
It's a musical effect.
Yeah.
But it all depends on the context.
Yeah.
That's what I think.
Yeah. Like I think that's what I realized. It's like having all the facility in the world, and that's never been like my weak suit. Like I've always had like plenty of means to get around and play quick and complicated things. It's always been more like, well, I like phrasing and,
Now, did you learn these kind of in tandem? Were you learning phrasing and finesse and articulation and in tandem with developing your technique? Or did the technique come first and then you had to like not unlearn the technique, but learn how to use it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it had
Because
to
on
get...
your records, there's some really nice lyrical things there. It's
thanks,
fantastic. And I don't hear a bass player who just defaults to crushing the instrument.
Right.
Like they're musical statements that develop and...
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's like, I think for a while, there's always the emphasis for me, there was an emphasis on like playing, like having like the ability to execute things that like, are clear and can be played fast. But like the other part of it was, when I realized I wasn't as good at playing like slower things, or that there was like more I could do with things that were like bigger phrases, and just there's ways you can use your left hand to make it more lyrical. There's ways that you can like attack with your right hand to make certain things come out and really be expressive. That is where I think both of those things start to congeal. And I also feel like, when I have recordings of myself when I was like 22. They're on cassette. And I remember I listened back to one of these not too long ago, and I laughed to myself, of course. Like, I didn't listen to this in front of people, but just the amount of notes I was coming out of the gate with, man. Like,
but did you hear it? Did you hear what it would become?
I don't know.
Like, if you go back, could you hear like, okay,
yeah,
I kind of see now that you're you now.
Yeah,
I'd be like, okay, I can see that it was in there.
Yeah,
it was still within the block of clay. It hasn't been fully extracted as a sculpture yet. It's in there.
Yeah.
But I can still see it in there.
Yeah.
It's just clouded by, you haven't been around the block enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like I can hear the promise of some good shit.
Okay.
Like, but I also feel like, there's a thing I liked about being a younger musician that I think sometimes the more people play, they lose it. And I think it's like a weird thing to lose, because I think like you can learn restraint and still have this edge thing that you have as a younger musician. Mm-hmm. That's been something I've been like really interested in trying to retain, but like be able to turn on and off. Okay. Like, because I think like if you're trying to be the kind of musician that, or for bass, like if you're trying to be the kind of bass player that maybe not everybody, but a wide variety of people would call for something, like it's like, well, how transparent can I make what I do and still make it work? Like, and it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you kind of assess, am I being called to be an artist, or am I being called to be an artistic craftsperson? Mm-hmm. Where like, this is what it is. Right. This is what I'm going to have to do to make it work, and it's going to work, and this is exactly what they need from me. And so I feel like that approach to playing is something that's been a worthwhile thing to embrace as well. And I just think it kind of happens like the more you play with people, and maybe in my case, because I made records of my own in two contexts where it's like I have control to put down whatever I want, and I decide I'm going to not put stuff there. It got me to think more about like I think writing compositions got me to think about other people's compositions more. Like, sure. What am I doing? Yeah. What do I absolutely need to do? What can I get
a bass player?
Yeah. What can I like cut out? Sure. And totally be okay with not overplaying or not, doing anything more than it requires, and trusting that. And I still really want to I still in my mind have this fantasy that I'll get called for that kind of thing too. But there's also what I liked about hearing like young recordings of myself is like, I just didn't give a fuck, man. And like, I think some people get very safe in their playing, and I don't like that. Mm-hmm. I think I think if there's a way to like,
what's your process to go about keeping the freshness? And not getting stuck in these habits within your own playing, because we all do it at a certain point. Yeah, like, we do enough of it that you end up just kind of playing the same licks, even if you don't mean it. If you're not always kind of practicing in it, for me at least, if I'm not exposing myself to new ideas and playing something new regularly, it's gonna become. The playing's gonna get tired and stale, and they're gonna be the same things. Yeah, that I'm burnt out on hearing. So I can't emotionally connect to them the same way.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is just trying to be present.
Sure.
And not worry so much about... It's hard to do, because sometimes, like... And especially because, like, I still feel like I'm sort of new out here. there's this whole desire to want to sound good, but like I can't. I'm probably not as effective if I'm worried about that. Like to the point where it's a conscious thing. So
let's go there. So let's pick the story back up. You're at Berkeley.
Yeah, I'm at Berkeley.
You said you go twice. You finally graduate?
Yeah. So I went. Basically, I took a break from like 1996. Then I went back in the fall of 2000, and I was up in Boston. I think I finished what I had to finish within like a year and a half, 2 years. But I stayed in Boston.
Okay.
Until 2004.
Okay. But now, was your first record was 04 or 03?
First record came out in fall of 04.
Okay.
I started recording it in 2002.
Okay.
It took a while, and there was like some personal shit going on. Like my old man got sick and eventually passed on. But
oh man,
it was one of those things where it was like I didn't want to put it out when that was happening.
Sure, that's a lot.
So the beginning of 2003, all the tracking was sort of done, and it was ready to.
And it just kind of hung ready for mix and press.
Yeah, and like get master and stuff. And then I guess halfway through 2004, it's like I got to put this out, and I'd started to think about moving to New York, and that actually got put off by a year because I didn't want to go right after something like that went on. Like I wanted to stay in familiar territory.
Sure, I mean those are two big life events.
Yeah.
Moving to another city.
Yeah.
New York, like I've been there, but I've never lived there.
Yeah.
But I remember coming out here.
Yeah.
I messed up, man. In retrospect, I would have done this a lot differently. I got married and moved to LA all in the same weekend.
Oh wow, man, that's a lot of change.
Yeah, it was too much. It was too much. I could have played that a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to roll the dice, man. I've never been married. I've been close, but it didn't happen.
Yeah. I'm not anymore. But
oh man, sorry. Yeah.
Thanks. But that was to go back to deal with two of those life events at the same time. I think you did it the right way. At least that's a mature decision. You know, to like, okay, let me kind of wrap my head around one thing. Before I go bite into all this. Yeah.
I also was living in a really great place in Boston at the time. Like I lived like me and a bunch of friends were sharing one side of this old house.
Okay.
And they were all musicians, and it was the kind of thing where we'd have sessions in the basement, we'd have parties, and I just felt like...
Are those dudes still active on the scene?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's like a couple of them. There's like some pretty well-known people that lived in that house. Like one guy that lived there, who's a buddy of mine, and I haven't seen him in years, was this drummer, Tony Escapa, who his old man was like Menudo's MD and keyboard player.
Oh, crazy.
But Tony's been playing with Ricky Martin for like, I think 10 years or something.
Okay.
He's a ridiculously great drummer, man.
Is Ricky still touring?
Yeah.
Really?
He still does stuff.
Okay.
And then he was also a really great hand percussionist. So like he was there. This guitar player, John Shannon, I don't know if you've ever heard of that dude. He was there for a while. John's great, man. Like he played with Hiromi sometimes. Like when Fuse wouldn't do it.
Okay.
And then
I've never known her to have anything but the trio. Like I have that first record with Tony Gray.
Yeah.
There's like a DVD included.
Right. And Tony and Martin. Yeah, like so John had a band with Martin and the guy that played bass on the first Hiromi record, Mitch Cohn.
Okay.
And Mitch does like a lot of R&B stuff now. Like he kind of, for a while, Mitch was sort of like he was coming sort of from like a Matt Garrison standpoint. Matt was another musician that fucked me up big time. I'll talk about that when I talk about But like, he's a buddy of mine. I love Matt. But
I met him once at the Potato.
Yeah.
It was like NAMM week, which, as you've probably known since you've been in LA, it's like it's bigger than Christmas when NAMM is in town.
Yeah. This last name sucked for me, man.
I didn't go. Like I don't want to go unless I have a reason to go.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go and just walk around. It's too noisy.
Yeah.
The parking lot, like the parking situation. It's.
Yeah.
But I was at the Potato.
Yeah.
And it was Kinsey, Garrison, Covington.
Oh, okay, Covington.
And Scott Henderson.
Oh, right on.
So like, super band. Like super fusion, super band.
So Tribal Tech without Gary.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, like, I'm out back, and then Garrison just comes walking out, and he comes right up to me. He's like, dude, check out what time it is. And he shows me his phone, and it's the clock from Copenhagen. He's like,
wow.
I'm still on that time.
Wow.
And like, we're talking about the time exchange and how he's all jet-lagged.
Yeah.
I don't know, we had a nice conversation, but it was short-lived while he was on a break.
Yeah.
Henderson, it kind of outplayed the whole band that night. Henderson was on fire.
Yeah. Yeah, and those guys are awesome, man.
Yeah.
But what was I saying, man? Oh, yeah, so there was a bunch of other musicians that lived there. It was just a really good, healthy place to be while I was sort of processing, like, really, really kind of awful news. And
Was it a focused house? Like, that many musicians can either be like a party house, or it can be like a focused, we're all really into this, and kind of not that there's a direct accountability there, but there's like such a strong presence of growing and just absorbing music, and growing kind of as friends in this peer group, or everybody's screwing off together and just partying all the time.
Right. No, it was pretty focused.
That's cool.
And then this other great bass player, Jordan Scanella, who's been doing the Hamilton tour, he lived there. Yeah, it was pretty productive. Every now and then there'd be a party, and I think not like once a month, but a few times there'd be parties, and sometimes like they'd get a keg and charge money. And the last time they did it,
but it wasn't like the college house where it's just like it's a nonstop party.
Yeah, no.
Like it's a Tuesday afternoon and there's somebody playing Grand Theft Auto and drunk on the couch.
No, we never had that. I mean, we definitely threw good parties. Like I remember one time I got home like not late but later, and there was some kid. He wasn't like passed out, but he's like laying down kind of near our lawn. And he's like, "Are you guys having any parties anytime soon?" I'm like, "Nah, I don't think so, man."
Yeah.
He's like, "That last one was great." It was just some like neighborhood kid or something.
Nice, the legend had.
Yeah. But it felt like old school, dude. Like that movie Old School. Like, because I was like 28 at this point.
Yeah.
And like, I just felt like. So the last party we had was. I wasn't there for some of it because I think I was playing earlier in the night. And it was definitely one of those. This would have been like 2004, I guess. Like summer 2004. So there's like an election. And that year, like it was like John Kerry and Bush. I didn't like Kerry. I mean, you know, I'm on the liberal side of stuff, but I didn't like Kerry, and I didn't feel like he was gonna do the thing. So I think they were actually raising money at this party to like donate to Kerry's campaign. And I think I didn't get into an argument with my housemates, but I said I want my cut. I'm putting that to my moving fund. I'm not donating to Kerry.
Okay.
Which, you know, I don't know, man. Like, whatever. That's how I felt.
No, that's fine. Like, yeah, I get it. I was reading all these, like, I remember when I was, what time? It was one of the times I was in college, maybe the first time. I moved out to Tempe, Arizona, and me and my roommate, just like, you know, it's the same kind of thing. Like, you get really heady and assertive about whatever your paradigm is because, you know, you're coming into your own to a point, and you really take all that super, super seriously.
Yeah.
Now, something like politics is something to address if someone's going to chime into that. Like, that's a worthwhile cause that will impact us the rest of our lives.
Sure.
But we were into, like, just all this free-thinking, borderline, not anarchist stuff, but all this really free literature and kind of stuff. I forgot the names of some of the books, but it's funny to think back on.
Yeah.
We're just so dogmatic about this thing.
Yeah.
You know, in my early 20s.
Yeah. It was weird, but the party was sort of, it wasn't an overt thing, but that was the plans of the folks I was living with. And I just remember, like, seeing some of the people there, and there was no, like, it wasn't like there were undesirable types there, like people that, like, just wandered in that looked like they were going to cause problems. Because that kind of stuff, one time that did happen.
There's some problems?
Yeah, we had, like, I don't know if I was living there at the time, but I remember hearing about, like, some dudes kind of got in there and, like, they were trying to start something, and it got averted, but it was definitely, you know, when you have a place that's sort of open
Yeah, and it wasn't that many musicians means that much musical equipment.
Yeah,
like nothing ever got stolen.
No,
okay,
no,
cool.
it was never bad like that. But I did notice there were like some younger looking people there, and I remember like I was chatting with these girls out front that had like red cups and like, and one of them was talking about how like Dennis Kucinich had like visited their school, and I was like, "What school? BU?" And they're like, "No, like this." I forgot the high school was, and I was like, "Give me your red cups."
Yeah, right
like,
now.
I'll give you your money back, but like you can't be here. And it was one of those like weird things. Was like, yeah, we can't do this if people aren't gonna vet who they're taking.
And were all the housemates kind of on board with this, or were you
the
the heavy hand sometimes?
No. I mean, everyone. No one wanted it to turn into one of those things, but I mean it. And who knows if they're the ones that paid for the cups, but I just knew that, like, having a well-intended thing like that could easily turn into something weird, and like, I don't know. But that was a really positive kind of place to live, because it was like everyone was kind of on their grind, doing their thing, and it was definitely a healthy place to be around people when I was sort of fighting. There's a couple things were going on. Like I was dealing with the loss of my dad. I was also like 20 days after he passed, I quit smoking cigarettes. And so thanks to the winters of Boston and the house having a rule that no one can smoke inside, and it being like, -4 on certain, it became a real
outside for it.
Yeah, it just became a real easy place to like exist and not be a smoker. So I think it enabled me to sort of
Did you stay off?
Oh yeah, I never relapsed or smoked anything after that. I mean, I like edibles and stuff, but I don't want to smoke weed or like vape, because I'm sort of afraid of like, no one really knows what the long-term effects of vaping are.
It's true.
So,
everybody knows cigarettes will kill you.
Yeah, cigarettes.
like that one's already figured out.
Yeah. The irony is, like, cigarettes were like the greatest networking tool ever.
Yeah.
So I don't regret being a smoker, but I'm glad I quit when I was 28 years old, because one, moving to New York, literally, if I was a smoker in New York around the time I moved there, I mean, that would have been an extra $400, $300 a month. Yeah. That's like a pack a day, like $12 for a pack. So like, that's absurd to me, man. Yeah. So, but no, so that environment in Boston, especially as I was getting ready to leave, was a really positive, good one. And then, I moved to New York fall of 2004.
Okay. And then did you already have some friends there that would get you plugged in?
Well, okay.
Or are you just like going to jams? You're doing just meeting musicians however you can, and
it was a little bit of that. I think the thing was like my record was coming out that fall. I had some stuff lined up with Fiuczynski. Like, my first tour of Europe was going to happen in early 2005, like with Screaming Headless Torsos. So my first run of Europe was going to be with one of my favorite bands. Yeah. From like being a younger musician, I guess. And I had just played with Vernon Reid for the first time when he did something in Boston. So I knew him, and I started doing some stuff with him in mid 2005. So I had a few things kind of already lined up. There's definitely mistakes I made when I got to New York that I didn't realize till maybe 5 or 6 years later, where it's like, I wasn't as social as I could have been. Like, I did have friends there. Yeah. But I don't really come from the world of, like, going to jams and hanging. Like, in Boston, there was a place called Wally's. And
I've been there.
Yeah. So I played at Wally's every now and then. I would sub for Mark Kelly, who's now on the Roots. Okay. Mark's a good friend of mine. But, I would play there every so often, and I liked playing that, and people would sit in, but Mark was actually the one that...
You were in the house band for those, or you'd go...
I was in the house band for those sometimes. Like, I would sub for him, but...
And those are pocket?
Pocket. Yeah. Yeah, for all night.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kind of tunes are being called there? Is it like...
The same ones people play now, like...
Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder.
World is a Ghetto, Michael Jackson, Maputo. Yeah. Can't Hide Love.
Okay, because I know the East Coast and the West Coast have just like different go-to songs.
Right.
Like tunes that New Yorkers are like, no, that's one of our standards.
Yeah.
Isn't necessarily out here, and I only know that from New Yorkers who move here.
Yeah.
And like, oh man, that's a tune that gets called in New York a lot, but not out here.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of stuff like that. Every now and then, like there'd be like sort of a wild card, like Frankie Beverly and Mays thing. I didn't do it for it a lot, like, but I did. A lot of my friends spent significant time playing there. That's where I met I met Nikki Glaspie playing there. Like I've known her for almost 20 years. It was like an important place to go, but, you know, I initially had a really bad experience there when I was like 17. So I didn't ever really want to go back to that environment, even though like I outgrew where I was as a 17-year-old musician, which was like
You had a bad experience at Wally's?
When I was 17,
What happened?
It wasn't a bad experience at all, man. As a 17-year-old, it was a bad experience. I got
just like eat it on stage.
Well, okay, so I had played with this drummer at Berkeley, who's an amazing drummer from Houston. This guy Mark Simmons, and like we were just jamming on like grooves. We weren't playing tunes, and I guess Mark from that thought I could play well.
Okay,
and I probably sounded good playing that stuff, but I didn't know a lot of tunes, you know, so I got called to sub for somebody, and I didn't know any of those songs. Yeah. And I fucking, you know, stepped on, you know, like I ate crow that whole thing, and it sucked. And the guy who was really hard on me was the guitar player, and he was like, "Look, man, don't come back until you know all these tunes."
Okay.
And so, like, I never really I think because maybe I was young, I didn't really internalize that lesson the way I should have, which would have been like, just learn the tunes and come back. Like,
right.
It wasn't like you suck or whatever, but you know,
full rejection.
Yeah.
Thing
But I was 17 and everything felt bigger than it actually was, and
sure.
You know, like
how old were these musicians that were?
Oh, like 30s.
Oh yeah,
like,
those guys are like the veterans of like who you want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I come back to Boston later on, like when I'm finishing my stuff, I was like 24, and I'd done a lot of playing, and I knew a pretty decent amount of tunes, and like that part of my musical development had been somewhat sorted, you know? And I definitely was at the point where I didn't feel bad saying I didn't know something. Like I didn't, It wasn't like a direct, like threat to like whether someone thinks I'm a hireable good musician or not.
Yeah,
I could just say, yeah, I don't know that song, you know, or I kind of know what's the bridge.
But you have enough in the tank to be like, I don't know that one. What about this one?
Yeah. So I would go to Wally's reluctantly, even though like I'm well past being that 17-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And I remember one night, like, Mark would always be like, dude, come down and hang and, like, sit in. And I'd be like, man, I don't know if I want to sit in.
Right.
One night, Mark just got up and left the bass there, and he just said, go play.
Yeah.
And, like, just finish the set. And at that point, I think Rustlin was playing keys at that point. Because I know him from the East Coast. And
yeah.
Because he was in Boston for a while.
You know Brian Ladd?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know Brian. So... You know, we played and it was great and it was no big deal. And I got over that hurdle and, you know, I played down there a lot. And that guitar player who, you know, had said all that stuff to me, he was on those gigs and he loved what I was doing and we got along. And one day after a gig, I said, hey, man, do you remember back in 1993, like some kid coming down here and playing and not, you know, and he's like, no, he's like, I was probably stoned. I was like, yeah, that was me. Yeah. and I was like, man, you said, don't come back unless you knew the tunes. And he was like, well, you didn't know the songs, man.
Yeah.
And, you know, I got it, but it was, so I don't know, man. I think like that whole approach to playing and stuff and that scene, like the whole scene of like going to jams and stuff, like that's not my fundamental default when it comes to like what do I do to like find ways into a scene. But
because when I was talking to Brian, like that's his thing. Like
that is his thing.
He's just out there.
Yeah. I actually feel like it would behoove me to do more of that. And I think it's also important to like know your community and like hang with people and sort of be engaged in it. And I think like there's definitely, you know, points where I could do more of that. And I will, because but I also know some of the things I want to do are not really like attached to that thing.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up is through talking with Brian and what you said earlier today, you guys aren't necessarily going for the same target.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
You mentioned that you're not just like the nondescript side guy thing.
Yeah.
Isn't your thing. And I'm not going to say that he's a fan of that, but he just likes being in a situation that feels good, and he's got this great way of approaching everything that I think was wonderful, and I love talking to him because he's just so much less. I overthink everything, and if it's not this laser-focused deal, I don't want to be involved. And he's got this really cool way of just like, man, I just want to play music. It's fun, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm having a good time, and everybody else is having a good time. Like, he's got this super cool, lighthearted approach to it all.
Yeah. I want to get to that place sometimes. The thing that, so, you know, I mean, we're jumping around here, but when...
Well, let's so you're in New York.
I'm in
You're
New York.
getting plugged in. You got the tour coming up. I'm going to purposely hijack this because I want to talk about how you, from listening to your records, what was the process for writing the way you did on the second record versus the first record? Because the second record, there's a lot more programming on.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed, I don't even know how you would, what the right term would be from like a compositional approach, but it's like this kind of modular approach to creating a piece where there's just like these big sections and they turn quick. Like sometimes you don't see them coming.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're here now.
Yeah.
But it works. It's not like you just got snipered.
Right.
Like it, it works, and there's still, you're like okay, I could see why this makes sense, and it was thought out. How do you go about doing that? Was that something that was created in the studio over the course of, or do you actually like have a vision for this whole arc when you sit down and somewhere it's in Sibelius? All right. That is part 1 with Steve Jenkins. Stick around for part 2 of the conversation where he will respond to that question and talk about his process in writing both records, actually. I'm not going to do too much talking here. I want to get right to the second part of this and not hinder the flow. So I will see you in part 2 of the episode with Steve Jenkins.